Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, continuing our discussion on guns and public safety and an individual's right to protect themselves. Pleased to be joined by John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, former senior advisor for research and stats at the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Policy, author of books including Gun Control Myths and More Guns, Less Crime. John Lott, thanks for joining us again.
Oh, it's great to talk to you. Thanks for having me on.
And on a personal note, too, we just want to extend our condolences. I heard of your mom's recent passing, and so we're very sorry to hear about that.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. That's very nice of you.
You wrote a piece recently about violent crime, specifically murders, and the concentration of murders in a relatively small number of counties in the country. But it's a small number of counties, but it happens to be the big urban centers where a lot of people live. And the concern, in addition to just the aggregate amount of people being murdered and shot and otherwise violently victimized, is with laws like the Safety Act in Illinois or the rewrite of the criminal code in D.C., that violent crime that's concentrated in the urban centers could start to become more pronounced in the suburbs. How real is that concern?
Well, I mean, right now it's become more and more concentrated in the urban areas, not in the suburbs. You look in 2014, about 69% of murders were in the 5% of the worst counties. By 2020, it was 73% of the murders were in the worst counties. And it's not just that you have that, but even within those counties, murders are very heavily concentrated. So, for example, we broke down the data for Los Angeles County by zip code, and 86% of the murders are in 30% of the zip codes. You have about 40% of the zip codes account for 1% of the murders. And the same thing true nationally. If you look, over half the counties in the United States have no murders in any given year. Another 20% have one murder. So you have 70% of the counties in the United States that have either zero or one murder in a year. So it's very heavily concentrated in a small set of counties, and even within those, it's very heavily in very tiny areas.
Well, we see, I mean, certainly we see that in Chicago, so we know what you're describing to be the case. However, just to go back again, as you know, just from being as an observer of the passing scene, what do big cities dominated by the left want to do? Socialize their problems to the surrounding suburbs. And that's what Chicago has always done. And with, a rewrite of how law enforcement can respond to the commission of crime, with a rewrite of how judges and prosecutors can adjudicate criminal cases, as we had in Illinois, and apparently as is going on in Washington, D.C., it seems to me that one of the problems that big city leftists are trying to socialize is their crime problem, in part to take the heat off of them, as cynical as that is. I think that's at play. I don't know how else you describe something like the Safety Act.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, Cook County includes more than just Chicago.
Right.
And Kim Foxx is the district attorney for all of Cook County, so her types of policies apply to the suburbs right around Chicago that's there. But look, you and I are in agreement. It's not rocket science about why you've had the increase in violent crime over the last couple of years. If you have district attorneys who aren't prosecuting criminals, if you have places like Chicago, which in 2020 cut the number of police officers by 400 positions and transferred other officers to make sure that more officers were guarding Mayor Lightfoot and others, politicians in the city. If you have the bail reform, that you've had in many places in the country, if you had liberal judges who have released in many urban areas over half and in some cases 2/3 of the inmates from prison, it's not difficult to figure out if you're making it so much less risky for criminals to go and commit crime that you're going to have more crime that's going to be occurring. There is some evidence. We looked at some evidence in California that indicated that what was happening is what you were saying, that you had crime moving out of within a county from very narrow areas to more kind of affluent areas that were there. But that's pretty much in those counties like Los Angeles County, where you have the district attorney who has the same types of rules in terms of what he's deciding to prosecute over the entire county.
So we have this new assault weapons ban, obviously, in Illinois that took effect, and our governor is pretty upset that dozens of sheriffs refuse to enforce the new law. What say you?
Well, we've had a federal assault weapons ban. We've had state assault weapons ban. There was a federal judge decision in California about a year ago that said, look, the experts for the state of California weren't able to provide any evidence that either the federal ban nor any state ban had any impact on any type of violent crime, whether it was mass public shootings or whether it was murders generally. What the Illinois ban does is it has a list of guns, based on how they look, and then they have features similar to, like bayonet mounts or whatever on the guns that are similar to the original federal ban that's there. To go and ban guns based on how they look or these types of cosmetic features makes no sense to me. Biden at least has talked constantly about banning all semi-automatic guns, but if you want to ban, let's say, all semi-automatic rifles, what's the alternative? A manually loaded gun where you have to physically, after you fire a shot, physically put another round in the chamber? That really hurts law-abiding citizens. It makes it very difficult for them to go and defend themselves, because if you have to fire multiple shots because you're facing multiple criminals, or if you fire and miss, or if you fire and wound but don't incapacitate the attacker, you may not have the luxury of time to go and manually reload your gun again. If you think the notion of somehow banning semi-automatic guns is going to stop criminals from being able to go and get guns, go and look at Mexico. Since 1972, Mexico's had only one gun store in the country. The most powerful gun that you've been able to legally buy in Mexico since 1972 is a bolt action, so it's not semi-automatic, 22-round short round rifle. That's not the gun that the drug gangs are using in Mexico. And they've many years, not only has their murder rate doubled since they had those rules went into effect, but they have a murder rate in many years that's 6 times higher than the murder rate in the United States. You have to be careful that when you pass rules that you're primarily not going to be disarming and making it difficult for law-abiding citizens to defend themselves relative to criminals. You may take a few guns away from criminals, but if it's mainly the law-abiding citizens who turn in their guns, or Connecticut had a similar assault weapons ban in 2013, and now the guns that they grandfathered in, the governor and the attorney general for the state there are pushing to say, you register them, kind of what you've registered, setting up a registration system in Illinois. And once people have registered them, then they go and tell them, we're banning them now, and now we know who owns them, and we're going to send the state police in to make sure that your guns are confiscated.
Yeah, well, right. So, what you have to remember is that, and I understand this, is that the perspective of these people always pushing these bans and the same kinds of bans is they want to ban guns. They're the same people that supported a handgun ban in cities like Chicago a generation ago. Their angle is to ban guns. They can't do it easily because of the Supreme Court decisions and Heller and McDonald, and so they're trying to get through the back door what they can't get through the front door. We just saw actually a federal judge rebuke the state of New Jersey, Phil Murphy and the gun banners out there for, okay, you have a right to carry, but we're going to make it impossible for you to carry anywhere. And the judge says, well, you're eliminating the right that they have, by other means rather than just a direct ban. And so we were talking before you joined us that that case in New York last year, the Supreme Court adjudicated,
right,
is really an important one that weighs on the law that was passed in Illinois, because you can't just make a general this is going to improve public safety argument with or without evidence. You have to look at, as the majority opinion said, you have to look at the actual black letter language of the Second Amendment and the sort of legislative history to ascertain whether this is a regulation that is legitimate under the Second Amendment or not. So the days of just saying, I say it's going to improve public safety, and that's the auspices under which we're doing this, that's not good enough to pass constitutional muster.
Right, no, I agree with you. I mean, the New Jersey law, what it did was it said it banned concealed carry in any business, any public establishment, and within 100 feet of them. So that's any business, hotel, restaurant, any school, any church. And so, you could imagine, where are you going to be able to carry? In your front yard or something?
Right.
And so, and the Supreme Court decision, I agree, is potentially very important. Look, when I've taught in law schools, one of the things I always joked about is like you take something like the First Amendment where it says Congress shall pass no law. And you kind of ask yourself, what would they have had to write if they really meant that? Would they have to say Congress shall never, ever, 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 ever pass a law? And, and you finally get to like the eighth ever and you say, okay, they meant it there. But what judges like power. And what they like to do is they don't like bright lines. They like to fuzz things up. And so what they've interpreted as is Congress shall pass no law unless they have a good reason. And we, the judges, get to determine whether or not we think they have a good reason or not. So that way they can be involved in all sorts of important cases. And what Thomas did, in his opinion, he said, look, these balancing tests and these tests where we allow judges to insert their opinion just don't fly. You look at the writing exactly as you say, see what it says. If they say Congress shall pass no laws, that's what it means. Now, he's only done this with regard to the Second Amendment. My guess is he wants to try to do this with regard to the rest of the Bill of Rights. But the one problem is while Thomas had 4 votes for that, you had Kavanaugh and Roberts, who still liked the balancing test stuff, who still liked to be able to fuzz it up. So they need a solid 5 votes. And I kind of worry that, particularly given that the Democrats now control all the lower courts and Biden has actually been getting judges confirmed at a faster rate than Trump did, that, by the end of this term, Democrats will have well over 60% of the lower courts controlled, maybe even 2/3. And so I think what is happening is that they're going to try to slow walk a lot of these rules, hoping Thomas is 74. By the beginning of the next presidential administration, he'll be 76. Wow. And I think they're hoping that there'll be some change on the Supreme Court and they can reverse these types of rulings.
Yeah, that really underlines the importance of the 24 election, and not that it's not obvious, but it's a good reminder about where we're at with these hard-won victories at the Supreme Court level and how precarious they are. John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, former senior advisor for research and stats at the DOJ's Office of Legal Policy, author of books including Gun Control Myths and More Guns, Less Crime. John Lott, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Balance of Nature, changing the world one life at a time.
I'm a physician, and I still see patients every day. And, so I tell my patients about this. And they ask me, well, what are you taking? And so I tell them, taking Balance of Nature, and they go, oh, yeah, I've heard about that. So I tell them how to get it. I give them your telephone number.